All right. Well, okay, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name is John Schwartz. I am the Recovery Community Center manager here at the Windham Recovery Community Center for CCAR. I'm a recovery coach, professional facilitator, a smart recovery facilitator, and a whole bunch of other stuff. You know, a man in long-term recovery, a mindfulness meditation guy, and a real student of mythological systems and myth and legend. And we can talk about how that fits into my recovery story later. But the thing I'm trying to drive out here is the parallels between the archetypical classic hero's quest and the journey of recovery. So as we go along, you know, we're going to lay a little groundwork and then talk about, as we go through the stages of this journey, what some of those things look like and how it is that they correlate with recovery in general. Now, I have a couple of pages of materials, some notes that I took, and a copy of the actual rubric, which is conveniently separated into 12 steps or stages, oddly enough, non-coincidentally. And Travis is going to put that up for you in the chat if you want to access that material. So it's a couple of pages of notes because it's a lot of information, and I want to make sure that you have something to refer to going forward as you're trying to remember what went through. The other thing I have to just in the interest of full transparency, that I am originally a New Yorker, so I tend to speak really quickly, which I'm trying to moderate, so that if you find that I am just like running roughshod over this material and you want to just do something, you use the signal, whatever the signal is, just be like, dude. and I'll try and slow it down or go back over whatever it is that I just ran over, because that's how I am. I'm driven by adrenaline and anxiety, and so I often tend to go very quickly. So at any rate, welcome to this little piece. Like I said, I've been fascinated by this stuff for years. I hope that you find some value in it as well, and that you can carry it on to the people that you are supporting as well. So let's get going. Why don't we just introduce ourselves real quick, like who we are, where we're from, what we hope to get out of this thing. Because I haven't met, I don't think, any of you except Travis. So let's start with that. How about you, Sean?
Hey, everybody. So my name's Sean Wells. I'm the alumni coordinator for Stonewater Adolescent Recovery Center in Oxford, Mississippi. What I hope to get out of this, I too am a big fan of the archetypal hero's quest. I was first introduced to it during a family intensive therapy session here at Stonewater from our family support therapist, introducing kind of the idea of it. I also am very close to getting my credit hours for the CCAR RCP designation. So nice. It's been a long and exciting journey. But yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. Great. Daryl?
Hey, I'm a long-term recovery. I've been working as a peer recovery coach since 2017. Went through CCAR training in early 2017. Been a supervisor as a recovery coach since 2019. And it's information that I have obtained in this process that I would love to share with new and upcoming recovery coaches.
Awesome. Thank you. Great. Thanks for being here. And I can't see your name, guy at the bottom.
Is it me?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out.
Well, I'll go.
Please do. Go ahead, Aaron.
Right. Thank you, John. So my name is Aaron Wright. Originally from Philly, John. So I listen fast as well. I also talk fast. So yeah, I'm a person in recovery since January 2nd, 2015. Currently the program and data manager for a recovery community organization that operates in Northeast Maryland called Voices of Hope. Happy to be here. And as always, I just love learning more and more and more. Good to be with you all today.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. It was Rob. Rob, I couldn't see your name at the bottom on my ridiculous screen.
Oh, well, I don't know where I'm at on your screen, only where I am on mine, which is on top, which is where I'm always at in my mind. So I'm a person in long-term recovery since August 4th of 2009. I think I took Recovery Coach Academy, I want to say in 2016 or 2015. I can't remember exactly now. It's been a long time. I've been working as, a professional with lived experience, or as Maryland, they call them peers in recovery since, really since even before then. I now work at Hartford Mobile Crisis as part of the Mobile Crisis team, dealing with mostly people who have substance use issues, occasionally people who are return callers. I work with them, coaching them through life skills and their mental health stuff. And I've taken this one because I've been familiar with the heroic journey since like high school. The English teacher I had who used Star Wars to teach it, and came across it again in yoga teacher training, and just thought it would be an interesting way to view recovery, because I'm always looking for other ways. I've been sober a long time, and I know that people view recovery their own way, and I'm always looking for other ways to kind of teach recovery to people or help them find their way into recovery. And then also, I've never done the professional designation, so I wanted to get that finished and maybe get to take a class and keep my facilitator, because I also became a facilitator in like 2018 for Recovery Coach Academy, and I want to try to hang on to that. But the important part is getting the knowledge.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. Now, I think you'll find that this whole business, the correlation between these two things turned out to be wonderful motivational talking points. This whole idea of like, find where you are with this, and like how easy it is to become the hero of your own story simply by embracing the concept of willingness, right? I mean, I read this thing recently that said that the degree to which that we can like develop spiritually has to do with the intensity of our longing and our willingness to be able to turn toward the unknown. And I think that recovery has a lot to do with those same things. And I think you'll see a lot of parallels and a lot of opportunities in this material to use as sort of motivational ideas. Orel?
Yes, good morning. Yeah, my name is Orel Smith. I am the community outreach coordinator and also a peer working here at the Mental Health Association of Westchester. I'm a little bit nasally, so you're going to hear it right now because I'm coming over a cold. I am a big proponent of the hero's journey. I love it as a paradigm for people in recovery to look at. And so when I saw this as a webinar, I'm like, I got to jump on it, because it's a tool that I use to help people kind of make their best their message.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm glad you feel that way, because that's exactly how I feel about it. Jess?
Hi, I'm Jess Goldenbrowski. I'm the training program coordinator at Voices Hope. So Aaron is my coworker. And he came in and said, hop on this training. So I'm here. I know nothing about it, but I'm interested in learning. And
All right,
Rob, hi, nice to see you.
We're just about to weigh anchor, so more will be revealed, right? That's how that goes.
Works for
And
me.
Stephanie. Stephanie, you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Stephanie. I'm work out in Green Bay, which is Oneida Behavioral Health. I'm a recovery coach. I've been in long-term recovery. I just had 32 years. I'm just looking forward to hear more information.
Beautiful. And Stephanie, I may have to lean on you either as a subject matter expert or as someone to correct me, because I have a little thing about Handsome Lake toward the end of this training, and I have a funny feeling you know a lot more about Handsome Lake than I do. All right, so thank you all for being here. I'm really excited about this. Let's get the show on the road. So we're going to be talking about the parallels between the classic hero's journey and the idea of recovery. And for whatever reason, I am not advancing my slideshow, and I don't know what that's about. All right. So we're going to talk about the importance of mythological systems in human history. We're going to talk about the classic hero archetype and its place in civilization and how it sort of like keeps civilization on the rails. The idea of the hero's quest or journey, the rubric in terms of the layout of it, it's 12 steps and 3 stages, that being separation, initiation, and return. Parallels and correlations between the hero's journey and the recovery process, and the whole idea of creating a mythology for the recovery community. So that's sort of where we're going. So what is myth and what purpose does it serve, right? So mythological systems have been developed by all cultures throughout history in order to explain the seemingly inexplicable, right? So let's say you're some sort of primitive man. I may be a primitive man right now in some ways, but there are certain things that no one could figure out or explain. And so people were filled with fear over where does the sun go? Where does the sun go? Why is my friend who I was talking to yesterday laying there cold? Why does this water fall from the sky? Why is this animal trying to attack me? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of these things that in the natural world, they're very difficult for human beings to get their heads around or explain, right? And so it leaves us as a class of people, as a species, in a constant place of agitation, anxiety, worry, concern, and confusion about what's going on in the world around us, right? This is where the idea of myth and heroes come in, right? Without some explanation of how the world and nature work, we'd be left to assume that our experience is completely random, with no kind of guardrails, with no kind of like parameters, right? So it leaves us in this state of utter confusion and agitation and anxiety because we don't know what's going to happen. So by creating these systems about how the world was created and why things are ordered in a certain way, it makes it easier for us as humans to get along with the day-to-day of life, like food, shelter, clothing, all of that business, like relationships and all that, without being worried about the fact that the world is going to come to an end any second and it's all going to be over. Otherwise, we'd sort of be curled into a ball someplace worrying about what was going to happen next without having any kind of idea, any kind of sense of safety or order, right? Anybody have any questions or comments about this stuff up to this point? Just because I can't see you, I'm yelling. I don't know why I'm doing that. My little Banksy photograph there. So myths help to explain the concepts of good and evil. Think about the whole idea and ambiguities. Think about the whole idea of, say, like the Norse god Loki. Actually, in almost every tradition, there's a trickster god, right, who just messes with humans to like make us confused or angry or fight with each other or whatever it is, or make us feel sort of different about how things are going on. So at one point, even in the Hindu tradition, like Shiva is the creator and destroyer of worlds. He's the god of love and death. It's like, so there's so many sort of dichotomies and separations within the world of myth itself that it helps us to understand that everything is not clear cut. There is no particular black and white about a lot of things, that the gray area is the majority of existence, right? But by being able to attribute some of these qualities, good, bad, and different, to some of these deities, some of these ideas, these mythological characters, we can start to feel a little bit more comfortable about human nature, about our own nature, and about our place in the world, right? You understand what I'm driving at there? Okay. Why do we need heroes? I think basically we need heroes because we're afraid a lot. There are a lot of things that are really scary, and my baser nature, and I can't speak for everybody else, but my baser nature wants to take the way of comfort and wants to take the way of ease. And it turns out that my personal growth and the problems that I'm looking to solve in my life, I cannot even address those things from that place, right? And wouldn't it be nice to have an example, to have a role model that I could follow to say, if this person can do this, by God, I can too, right? I mean, it's so important to have someone to look up to, someone to trust, someone to take comfort in knowing that it's possible to do these things, right? And so to have these heroes who stand up and say, this is not acceptable to me, this is what I'm going to do, this is the road to take, it's very, very helpful to the rest of us, right? Very, very helpful to the rest of us. Can anybody think of any reasons, any ideas about heroes? Why is it that we need heroes in the world? Aaron.
Thanks, Sean. I think one of the things, right, you alluded to previously is, right, the fear of the unknown, right? Fear, afraid. And I think in our way of dealing with fear is there, just like you said, there's got to be hope. So there's got to be a balance to that fear, someone that's going to take on that persona and face it. So once we kind of see it faced, then we know we have the power within ourselves to also kind of walk through that fear and face that fear.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's great to have people to look up to and people to use as examples for this kind of thing. Daryl?
I think we need heroes to make us realize that, or for us to think that there's other people out there that can protect us and save us from whatever perils we find ourselves in. We like to look outside of ourselves for the help, but all the time the help we need is within. That's how I feel about it. But we like to look out. It makes us feel comfortable knowing that there is someone or something out there to protect us. That's what I got out of it.
Yeah, me too. And the whole power of example, you know what I mean? Rob?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot of times too, that they serve to, give us an example of an ideal. That we're talking about honesty, or we're talking about hope, or we're talking about justice, to be able to point at, a concrete person who we think exemplifies that, or those qualities, that it gives us something concrete to point at and say, I want to be like him. I want to be honest like him, or I want to be sober like him, or whatever. It gives us someone to point at, an example of an idea we have.
Yeah, exactly. And there's so many of them. Like, I can think of my father-in-law. My father-in-law fought his way across Europe with Patton, and then came home, and on the GI Bill, like, got into a place where he could raise a family with 4 kids, and he was like the most humble and decent person I've ever met. I mean, I have no idea how to be a person like that, but in reality, like, I use some of his qualities as a way to order my own life, in a way like that, to keep my household stable, and to look at the ideals of being decent and doing what needs to be done, regardless of how frightening or difficult it might be. There's so many ways that you can point to that in life. And I just think that having heroes, and Rob, you stated it beautifully about the whole idea of people holding people up that have qualities that I want to emulate in my own life, is so important, because not only does it remind me that it's possible, but it encourages me to do better. And I think that's important. And then, eventually, we arrive at the place where our heroes are people like Richard Rohr, or Thomas Merton, or the Dalai Lama, where that whole change, or Don Coyhus, where the idea of change coming from within is so prevalent in their own story that you want to embrace that idea too, right? And that's huge. That's huge. Oh, here's a hero for you. Heroes have the capacity to inspire us to transform our ordinary doubt and fear-filled existence into one of endless possibility. I mean, this man, and I'm gonna get all teary here, but this man has done more for me on a personal level just by being who he is than so many other people have ever done. As a man who, regardless of what the universe threw at him, was like, this is important to me, this is what I'm doing, I'm going to continue. I mean, that word alone is such a powerful word, right? They increase our belief in and desire for change, and instill confidence that anything can be accomplished with the proper attitude, resources, and effort, right? I mean, I look at some of the sacrifices that people make in order to make my life better, in order to inform my process, and I can't but be humbled and excited about it, and get enthusiastic about making change in my own life. And I think that whole idea of being a motivator and being a power example can be so critical, especially in this recovery thing. I mean, in everything else in life too, but in recovery coaching and recovery in general, the whole idea of having people that we can use as examples and people whose qualities we're looking to embrace and emulate can be so useful in staying in the process. My experience as a recovery coach tells me that the vast majority of people who struggle with remaining in the recovery process is that they don't stay motivated enough to stay engaged. right? When you talk to people, it's like, I stopped doing this, I didn't do this, I wasn't doing, and these are all things that we were doing that we're not doing, and it's because we're failing to stay motivated, to stay engaged, right? So having regular contact with these people, these visionaries, these leaders, their thoughts, their ideas can be so useful in remaining in the process, right? I've been told from very early, like, a lot of golf analogies in my recovery for whatever reason, like stay on the fairway, play your way up to the green, all of this stuff, right? And I don't want to get into the weeds. I don't, So if I can do a few things on a regular basis to stay connected and stay in the middle of in that fairway, so you don't get and we call it the other 12 steps because it's conveniently, I said, arranged into 12 segments or parts, right? So this is the rubric, right? It starts off in the status quo, the ordinary world, and works its way through, and we'll go through these one by one. But the thing I want you to notice is that the 3 stages of the quest, right? Separation from the ordinary world, initiation into the special or extraordinary world, right, where all the inner work is done, and then the return to the ordinary world, having been changed by our experience in this extraordinary world, right? That's the crux of this model, and we'll see how it builds one onto the other. And as we go through these, just think about, and we'll stop periodically through this, about parallels between either your recovery journey on a personal level or the recovery journey in general, and what correlations or parallels you see between the archetypical classic hero's journey and the recovery story. Okay, everybody understand what I'm asking right now? It's a CCAR thing. You might understand. So we start off in the ordinary world. This represents business as usual, your day-to-day sort of life, Groundhog Day, wake up every day, I start every day the same. That Dwight Yoakam song, I start every day the same? You have to look that up at some point. Travis, look that one up. It's a good one. So it's the place from which we set off to discover ourselves and learn the important things about ourselves that will serve us and hopefully eventually all of humanity. So the call to adventure is there's something that needs to be changed, or there's something in the air that feels a little extraordinary, or there's something that's not working quite right, right? The hero often intuits or has a feeling on some level that something's about to happen, and we're not quite sure what it is, but that something's coming. I know that the last 5 or 6 years of my active use, I was very aware that there was a force that was at work in my life that I was going to have to reckon with at some time or another, and it cost me more and more money every day to not deal with that. And the hero often has a clear idea or a vision of the issue at hand and has been waiting for a sign to take action. Can anybody think of anything from their own lives or from people that they work with that would indicate the person being in that second place where they've gotten the call to adventure? Okay. In my life, there were lots of them where, I started to develop a conscience and I kept kicking the can down the road, and all these little things kept happening that would indicate to me like, now would be a good time. My experience in recovery has always been that the universe will, if it wants me to learn something, it'll keep offering me opportunities to learn this lesson. And as long as I keep denying the learning of that lesson, it'll make the circumstances around its offer more and more severe until eventually I have very little choice but to learn the goddamn lesson. And that's sort of just been my story through recovery. And I think that as we get into the next one, which is the refusal of the call, I think that one kind of speaks a little bit more clearly as to sort of what happens. But it was certainly clear to me that something needed to change. And I have to say that this time when I got into recovery, it's not my first time. Like, so isn't my first rodeo. Like I was clean and sober in the 80s for a few years, and then decided to go on an extensive sort of research project, which took me a 19-year sort of, run out there before I could be beaten into a state of reasonableness and come back. So that, those some of those lessons I paid a pretty high price for. So the third step in this is called the refusal of the call, and it's very common for people to get the idea that something needs to change and whatnot, and be given a pretty stark picture of what it is that needs to happen, and sometimes even how it has to happen, but it's really not something we want to engage in because it's frightening and difficult, right? So humans being human, we often have misgivings about taking a particular course of action, especially if that action is unfamiliar, frightening, or seemingly impossible. When first presented with the vision for their quest, the hero is often reluctant and will go to great pains to ignore or deny what is plainly before them. Again, we were talking, somebody mentioned the Star Wars thing in high school, right? Luke Skywalker refusing to join the battle against the Empire after having been rescued by Obi-Wan. But it is absolutely typical and to be expected. Think about when you're looking at Recovery Coach Academy Day 3, the whole idea of dancing with discord, like of rolling with resistance. I've known countless people who are absolutely desperate for recovery, but they don't want to talk about it. And they certainly don't want to get into the nitty-gritty details of the things that frighten them the most about the whole idea, or the things that they think are going to be the heaviest lift in terms of making the change, right? Because it's scary and it's hard. It's like people are coming in here attempting to perform the most frightening and seemingly insurmountable act that they've probably ever had to take on in their lives. They're going to be naturally resistant. They're going to naturally try and find a way. I tried so many ways to have my cake and eat it too. I can't even count them. You know what I mean? So it's to be expected. So when I'm put on notice that something in my life is not working or is functioning poorly, and I know that in order to get to the other side of it, I'm going to have to go through some icky, dark places, I'm going to put that off. I'm going to try and put it off. There's this Zen axiom that says change occurs when the fear of change becomes less than the fear of remaining the same. And for me, unfortunately, it has always been that. I've always had to experience a certain degree of emotional discomfort or pain in order for me to be motivated into making change and to persist, right, in chasing that goal down for change. That's just been the way it's always been with me. Can anybody relate to that? But the whole refusal of the call, I think it's a big part of the recovery process for a lot of people.
I have refused a call on several occasions.
Yeah, it just happened.
I remember because I can remember being invited to to change my life, and I ended up in college, and I ended up right back in the same place or worse than the place I was in the beginning. I just didn't want to give up. It kind of reminded me of the term cognitive dissonance. So that's what I got up out of this talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And humans are amazing in the fact that they're capable of holding completely contrary ideas in their head at the same time and seemingly being okay with it, which it's a fascinating thing. But I mean, I think about all the things that I tried to do in order to continue doing what I was doing and not get into all the geographics. Oh, it was everything else in my life. It wasn't me, and all the other things that I tried to do to sort of defray blame or put off if everyone else would just leave me alone and let me do what all that stuff. I'm sure we've all heard it a million times, but in point of fact, I was just scared. I knew what had to happen. I kept waiting for somebody to show up with that big fluffy velvet pillow with recovery on it, just hand it to me and be like, here you go, John, you've suffered enough. That didn't happen. Nobody ever showed up. You know what I mean? It's like my sponsor says, my 12-step sponsor says, recovery comes in the form of shoe leather. You want it? Go get it. Once you get it, hang on. That's it. So the refusal to call is a big thing, and it's very typical in a lot of people's sort of journeys, whether it's through personal growth or recovery or whatever it happens to be. The meeting with the mentor. And this is one of the things that I sometimes a person's mentor or guide person or whatever it is isn't necessarily a person. For me, it was a rabbit. It just, that's right. So it can be anything. It could be an idea, it could be something you read, it could be whatever it is, but it's the whole idea of gaining motivation and having the process informed, right, to the point where we feel comfortable and willing to do what needs to be done, right? We have a clear idea of what needs to be done, but we're not always well equipped for it. And sometimes our feeling of not being well equipped will be enough to keep us at that place where we're standing at the edge of the abyss and we're not willing to step out. So sometimes these people, and often the other thing is that we'll meet the person who will provide us with exactly the information that we're going to need sometime down the road and have no idea what it means. I can remember being, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years clean into the process and being in a situation and hearing in my head the voice of a guy who I had met when I was maybe 3 months in, and what he said was perfect for the situation I was in. Perfect. And unfortunately, I had held on to it long enough that it popped up at just the right time. But some of these things that we learn, we're not really sure when it is we're going to need these skills that we're acquiring, but they always turn out to come in handy. They always turn out to come in handy somehow, And let me tell you a little story about my interaction with this business with one of my early mentors. And one of my early mentors is Native American legend, right? So in the Algonquian legends, in the Algonquian lore, there is a rabbit named Matigwes, and Matigwes was always getting himself in trouble because he was always trying to be like all the other animals. He was trying to be like the otter and he would drown, and he would try and be like a bird and he would fall out of a tree, and he would try and be like a bear and he would get savaged by a badger, and all these things would happen to him because he was afraid to be himself. And the lesson that Rabbit learns, that Matigwes learns, is that in order to own his power, he needs to be authentic. He needs to be original. And one of the things that I learned was that I was such a chameleon in my life. I was such a people pleaser and such a chameleon that I didn't even know who I was. I didn't even know what was important to me because I was trying to make you happy. I was trying to make you not dislike me, not even happy. I just don't want you to dislike me. So for me, it was all about drilling down into like, who is John and what's important to John? What is John really looking to get out of the rest of his life? You know what I mean? And to own myself. And then my other mentor, Arthur Woodard, came in and started to talk to me about embracing the both andness, about how I am both angel and beast, and that's okay. Because until I could radically accept that, it was really, really difficult for me to be authentic and to own all of me, right? And that's where I got my power, was by becoming my own authentic self and not trying to contort myself into all of these other places and beings and entities in order to make other people happy, right? So sometimes the mentor is a story. Sometimes the mentor is an animal. Sometimes the mentor, it can be a sunrise. It's all in what worked for you and empowers the individual to get to the place that they want to go so that they feel comfortable embarking on what is arguably the most difficult and frightening thing that they've ever done in their lives. Anybody have any good mentor stories about running into a person, place, or thing that made you feel better about going forward and making change in your own life?
I remember the story about meeting my first sponsor. I was at a meeting, and at the end of the meeting, this gentleman shared, and it was, he was talking about how many DUIs he had and how many times he had been in recovery and just a bunch of all kinds of just stuff. And even at 3 months sober, I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever heard. This guy needs to shut up. He has no idea what he's talking about. And I guess that showed on my face as he was talking. Because after the meeting, this guy walked up to me and he said, if you don't do the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, that's exactly how you'll sound one day. And that was the thing, because I was not going to do 12 steps. I wanted nothing to do with it. But when he said that to me, that was exactly what I needed to hear. And then he went on and talked to me about steps in a way that sounded like I could do them. And that's the guy who ended up being my sponsor. And it's worth mentioning too that he's not necessarily someone I really like that much, but he was the guy who had the message in a way that I could take it in at the time and I could do things. And just one of many people that had I not met them when I met them, I might not have got sober.
That's a terrific story, and I totally feel you on that. It wasn't even somebody I necessarily liked that much. He was somebody who had what I needed to hear, and that part was less important, right? And I get you on that. Travis.
Thanks, John. For me, it was Phil Valentine. Actually, when I got into my recovery and I knew, like, I was in sales for a while, I knew that wasn't it. Right. I knew the corporate world wasn't for me, and I was able to get an interview with CCAR and get in, but I was still had kind of that imposter syndrome going on. I didn't really know if I was fit for it. I just knew I wanted to help people. Right. But the path ahead was not clear. And on my first day, I sat across from Phil and we talked, and he told me 4 words I will never forget. And I've only heard it, probably I could count on one hand the times I've heard it in my life. I believe in you. And that gave me the confidence to just keep going, even if the path wasn't that clear. And it was so powerful. And I carry it with me every day. Thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, Travis. And it can be so powerful to have somebody like that who just tells you that, that this is going to work out. It's wonderful. Daryl.
Yeah, I had a counselor who I couldn't stand. And it seemed like he didn't like me, and we had got into an argument one day. And he looked at me and he said, "You know what, man?" He said, "You're a smart guy. One day you could be sitting in my seat. You should go to college." And a light bulb went off my head. I was in treatment for 90 days. That was my 68th day. I didn't have a clue to what I was going to do in my life until he made that statement. And based upon the statement he made, I followed those instructions, and I'm here now. And I think back on if we had not had that altercation, that conversation, I probably wouldn't be sitting in the seat that I am right now. Because I didn't come to treatment to stop getting high. I just came to stop drinking. He helped change my life.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. And the same thing runs true for a lot of people. A lot of us come into this process just because we don't want to die. And then when we discover we have this capacity, right, because of our experience, to be of service to other people, and it's so filling, and like when you talk about some of the things you hear about, addiction being defined as a constant state of lack or a God-shaped hole or wherever it happens to be, right? That there's something missing, that this whole idea of being other-centered, of being more concerned about the well-being of others than about myself, turns out to be like the absolute perfect medication for my condition, right? Because not only does it help with my flagging self-esteem because I'm doing something nice for somebody for once, right? But it also keeps me out of my own head. Because I'm thinking about you, I'm not thinking about me. It's like the ultimate thing for somebody like me whose problem is being stuck in their own head, ruminating all the time. It's like the perfect answer. And sometimes just having somebody give you that word of encouragement, saying, you should be like. I remember having a conversation with a guy that I was coaching here, saying, guys like you should be hiring and firing guys like me. I really don't understand what the problem is. Let's work on getting you into a position where you can do the stuff that you're capable of doing, And I think that sometimes that kind of encouragement can be really helpful. All right, so now we've met our mentor. We're sort of gathering our resources in order to really set out on this trip to identify the things that we really need to address and to address them. Right. So I am having issues with this slideshow. I cannot advance this slide. Oh, there we go. This is where the real action starts, right? We made our commitment, and this is a Joseph Campbell thing. Follow your bliss. Find the things that give you joy, and find those things. And if you pursue them, they'll lead you ultimately to where you belong in life, which I have come to see as being more and more true as time has gone on. But they made their commitment to follow their bliss and to seek the answers to the riddles which will show them their purpose and to help them overcome the obstacles in their lives. And it's a big thing. Like, so much of this business is two-part, that I really never understood at the beginning, right? Like, I was great at asking for help. I was terrible at accepting it, like at giving permission for the help to help me, right? I was great at understanding the fact that there were things in my life that were completely beyond my control. I was terrible at accepting that. I was always operating outside of my zone of control and getting angry and frustrated because I was taking stuff on that didn't belong to me, right? So this is a big part of it. It's like, now I've decided, I've identified things in my life that need to be changed. I am actually going to take action and change them, right? So I'm working on both sides of that conversation. Trials, allies, and enemies. So as we take flight, as we start to leave, right, we're becoming aware of what we need in order to make any kind of impact on the things that we are trying to change in our lives. Like, do I need skill set? Do I need self-esteem? Do I need information? Do I need physical help? What else do I need? And I'm becoming aware of these things and trying to amass all these things so that when the time comes and I need them, I have my little hero's journey utility belt all stocked with all the items I'm going to need in order to get me to the other side of this. Along the way, we discover the importance of allies, and we become better capable of both accepting support and of discerning where their real support lies, right? So for a long time, when I was trying to deal with all of the things in my life that make me crazy, all my anxiety, my low self-esteem, my people-pleasing, all that other stuff, often when those things had me painted into a corner, I would resort to obsolete coping skills that I had developed when I was a teenager that had all kinds of ick all over them when it came to the recovery process, right? So some of the things that I was using in order to deal with some of my issues were also driving some of them, right? So over time, I've evolved different, healthier ways to manage my stuff without going into areas that perpetuate it, right? And I think that a lot of people in the recovery process tend to do that because a lot of the coping mechanisms that we developed when we were active or when we were younger are really not incredibly effective or useful given the changes in our lives that we're trying to make, right? So, so as a result, over time, and I was able to develop better, healthier coping mechanisms that were driving in the same direction as my overall trajectory was headed, right? And so I started to rely more on the sources of healthy, good information that I had instead of relying on pulling the ripcord and escaping by various and sundry means, right? And that was a very important watershed moment in my own life because instead of staying stagnant or moving backwards, I started to very gradually move forward. And I think that forward momentum can be really important. I personally am like one of those species of sharks that has to constantly keep moving or it just dies. Like I have to have forward motion at all times. For me, staying still is the same thing as going backwards. I have to constantly keep developing and growing and deepening my connection with the universe, with the God of my understanding, with the recovery community, and with the wounded part of myself that I sent into exile years ago that I'm trying to have a conversation with now to bring it back into the fold. I mean, all of this is important stuff, and it's all super healthy. And again, there are things that have developed over time and prepared me better to deal with, the supreme ordeal, which is just over the horizon. So here we're getting down to the fact that we know that the thing that is our largest issue, or the thing that we are most concerned about addressing, is just over the hill, right? So having gathered all of our resources, right, that we feel we need to bring to bear on this, we're bound and determined to see it through. We've taken stock of all the tools at our disposal and considered all the possible obstacles. Now it's time to confront the demon and get on with life, right? At this point, I am feeling both empowered and frightened, right? I understand the importance of doing what it is that needs to be done. And even though I'm afraid, I'm going to use the resources that I have in order to motivate me toward taking this thing on, understanding what I understand from having spoken to other people or getting information from other places about how best to deal with this, right? And to go forward. I remember this being a really big part in my own life about I was given an ultimatum by my employer at the time that if I didn't make some significant changes in my life that that our relationship was not going to be able to go forward. And I remember thinking I've been kicking the can down the road for some period of time about, you know, the moving goalpost, right? When this happens, I'll do something. And then that would happen. Well, maybe when this happens, I'll do something. Or maybe, and now I was put in a position where I absolutely had no excuse. And then it was like, the rubber has hit the road. Are you going to do something about this or not? Because one of my theories was, one of the reasons why I kept kicking the can down the road as long as I did was that I was really afraid that I was going to try and stop and I couldn't. You know, I really was very afraid of that I was going to be incapable of being able to stop, to become abstinent with all the substances I was using. And I just kept conveniently pushing it down the road because I didn't have to deal with it then. And now I'm in a situation where I actually have to steel myself and do this thing, right? Because the only place I have any self-worth left is in my professional life, and I can't have this taken from me or there will be nothing left. So at that point, I have made the decision that come hell or high Hiawatha, I am going forward with this thing, right? And come what may, things can't possibly be worse than they are right now, right? And so I go forward. And here's the supreme ordeal, right? So, you know, you hear about a lot about this whole business of the death of the ego and the rebirth of the new person, or the death of an old way of living and moving into a new lifestyle and all this thing. There's a shamanic death that takes place in a lot of these traditions, right? So this is what we're talking about here. We're talking about, you know, coming into a less person self-centered way of thinking, talking about a more unitive state of consciousness where we are connected to our peers, the rest of humanity, the universe, the earth, nature, all of these things, and using some of these things as resources in order to help us surmount our largest obstacle, right? The ordeal speaks to the hero's inevitable confrontation with their greatest fear. You know, it's like one of the things that I had a real hard time getting my head around early in recovery was this whole idea of the obstacle is the way, right? It is the thing that's holding me back, that holds my treasure, that has the greatest amount of information and insight onto how to live a better life. I need to wrestle with this thing or I will never learn this important lesson. And that lesson holds like the DNA for the rest of my life, right? So the mindset or perspective of the fearful, consumed individual must die in order for the newly minted hero, transformed by experience, to be born. And that frightening as that ordeal may be, it represents the only path to victory or freedom. This to me was this was the fulcrum of my entire recovery. Until I became willing to really look at the things that were driving my use, I was going to keep using. That was the way it was for me. And it wasn't like I got immediate understanding or wherever it was, but just the fact that I was on my way there, it made me hopeful for a brighter future. And it made that one day a little bit easier. Man, I came into this process like, I had no idea how long a day was. Those days are long in the beginning, man. You know what I mean? So just knowing what the thing was and actually knowing that I have the capacity and the willingness to go after these things, it makes me hopeful for a brighter future. And I'm interacting with these people around me and I'm seeing that their lives are improving because they're doing what they need to do. And I'm thinking, you know what? I might actually be able to do this. I might actually even want to do it, right? Think about that. Does anybody have any like anecdotes out of their own lives, out of their own story about what this looked like, what it looked like walking into the cave to like go after the big kahuna, the big one that got away? I know I was frightened. All right, we'll keep it moving.
Could that be going to treatment for me.
It sure could be.
Yeah, that was a supreme ordeal for sure, where it was just kind of like taking the plunge, dying in order to be born. A lot of change occurred there.
No doubt. The one and only time I was in treatment, it seems to me like the most harrowing part of that was when I realized that I was leaving in a week, and I just felt like I hadn't been paying nearly enough attention. I don't know what was going to happen to me when I got out of there. I was like, and that sent me running quickly into the arms of anybody else in recovery so they could tell me what the hell I was supposed to do. Aaron.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. For me, I'm very comfortable going into a 12-step fellowship and announcing that I'm an addict and all the things that I've done in my past, right? I'm very comfortable with doing that with family members, but I was given an opportunity, and part of my job here is to advocate on political, state levels, law enforcement, that sort of thing. So I was in a room full of the mayor, the commissioners, there was law enforcement, the chief of police was there, and getting up there and being like, man, I had a list of bullet points I wanted to hit, but something just came over me, and I was like, man, just be you, right? Just be you. And to sit there and say, you know what, I was a heroin addict for 23 years. I watched my daughter grow up in federal prison. I did all this, but that is not who I am today. Today I am, right, this. And it was a freeing moment for me, just harnessing that power just to walk through that dark side and just be transparent. And I was like, how are they going to take this? How are they going to take this? And a few people came out and said, man, thank you for sharing that story. Thank you for being so honest. I have a brother, you know what I mean? I have a cousin. And it was really a true moment for me to get over that hump, right? That peak, if you will, for me. So thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, but thank you so much for sharing that. And it's interesting how, so one of the reasons why I got involved in doing this kind of work, one of the reasons why I got involved in working in a recovery community center was I mean, most of the reasons I did this were completely selfish, like enlightened self-interest, right? The point is that the thing is that I'm very anxious around people. I'm a people pleaser. I find it very difficult to maintain relationships based on mutual trust and respect. So I intentionally put myself into an environment where that was all I was going to be doing all day, because I needed to learn that, and I wasn't going to give myself a pass, and you know what? Aside from begging my wife to marry me, it's the smartest thing I've ever done, right? Because it's increased my capacity for empathy in ways that I never expected. And it's really put me in touch with all of me, because I'm so good at compartmentalizing things, that if I hadn't put myself up against the thing that's sort of the thing that troubles me the most, I could very conveniently have put that into a box in a closet someplace and just gone on with my life doing other stuff. I ran kitchens for 30 years. I went around telling everybody what to do. If you didn't like it, too bad. It's very different dynamic than working in a place like this. So, I actually created the environment where I had to put myself up against that stuff just so that I would have to be looking at it every day to decide whether I wanted to continue as I was or to go forward in a different way. Anybody else about the Supreme Ordeal before we move on? I know I'm sucking all the air out of the room. All right, so let's say we go through this, we wrestle with this thing, and where do we wind up? Preferably not with Mel Gibson, but anyway, the reward, right? So by coming to terms with, by confronting our greatest fears, our greatest issues, right? And learning the importance of being true to yourself in terms of like following through on your life's purpose, right? We start to grasp the connectedness of all things, and we get new perspective on the world and our place in it, right? All of a sudden, it's not all about me and my worries and my issues and stuff like that. And I've learned this valuable thing, and I've gathered this treasure. I've got this boon, right? Now I get to decide whether I'm going to keep it to myself or whether I'm going to try and use it to help other people, right? And I think about all the people along the way as I was meeting my mentor and like refusing and being encouraged to resume the journey and all that stuff. of all the generosity and kindness that was paid to me, and how can I not share this, having learned this, having found the key to my particular lock? Maybe it fits somebody else's too. You know, maybe I can use this for the benefit of somebody else. And now that I've learned how important it is that I become acquainted with all of me, right? Can I share this with someone else to their benefit? Do I want to? Is it a benefit? You know, all of this other business, right? I mean, and some of the things that, one of the things that I'm thinking of now is that, sure, I confronted this business, right? But I really wasn't sure, aside from feeling a little bit better about it, what I had gained. But then I thought about all the preparation I did and all the things that I came up on in terms of information and feeling more comfortable and learning to work with other people and learning how to use resources and allies and whatnot. And that really was the essence of my change, right? That, like, the change in me was facilitated by my ability to be able to incorporate all of these other things that I was never able to do before, because I was so determined and so willing to get this done, right? So doesn't just transmitting that message have value, right? Doesn't just knowing that, like, preparing to do this thing and learning how to use tools and trust people and look ahead, and, you know, all of these things, these are all qualities that I may or may not have possessed before, but I certainly have them now, right? And I can talk about the benefits of trusting people, the benefits of personal growth, the benefits of embracing all of me, the benefits of learning about things that I want to do before I do them, so that when I go in there, I have some idea of what's going on in order to help inform somebody else's process. And on top of that, now I can talk about the rewards. I can talk about the benefits. Not only will you learn about these things, but the greater peace of mind, the capacity to be of service to others, the ability to transmit valuable information to humanity at large. I mean, come on, right? All great stuff, all great stuff. And all these things are as a result of simply being willing to do what needs to be done in my own life. As the hero begins his return voyage, he's aware that the world scenes change, but what he doesn't realize is that it's he who has changed, and the world is much the same. Life takes on new color. The sounds of nature are clearer. The hero has a newfound sense of purpose, now that the qualities of honesty, integrity, and vulnerability have come to reside or abide within him, right? Now that I've become honest, now that I have some integrity and I'm willing to share of myself, the world looks like a different place. Maybe it's not so scary. Maybe it's not so dangerous. Maybe I'm a little bit more enthusiastic to go on and explore things that I was a little afraid of before, right? Maybe I'm a little bit more willing to share my own experience in hopes of helping somebody else out. And there's Prometheus, the firebringer, right? Having been transformed by experience, the hero begins to imagine how their trials can be used as boon for the rest of the human family, right? Having risen above dualistic thinking, we're thrust into the degenerative stages, normally the second half of life, right? Their goal is now twofold, both to inhabit and enjoy their newfound freedom and to disseminate or share the wisdom they've acquired on their road to a new way of being, right? And can anybody identify with the idea of finding recovery and wanting to scream it from the rooftops? I mean, I was talking about a pink cloud, man. You know, if I had a megaphone, I would have gone to the top of the tallest building and be like, you know what? You really don't have to do that anymore. Like, I couldn't believe it. You know, people used to say these things to me, all those Pollyanna things that used to turn up in those rooms, like all those crazy, like, living a life beyond my wildest dreams. It's true. Go figure. Like, it turns out that it's all true. It turns out that it's all true. And who wouldn't want to share that? You know, the thing that I've become more aware of through the whole recovery coach dynamic and the CCAR, you know, spectrum of attitudes ideal is that sometimes my great love for my primary pathway of recovery can be used as a cudgel. And I don't ever want to do that. right? So I want to use my recovery as a source of strength to be able to embrace and support everybody else's pathway of recovery, regardless of what it is, right? And I say that about my recovery tradition, and I say that about my spiritual tradition, that I would never want to use my beliefs as a cudgel to try and push someone into doing something that they're not comfortable with, right? So one of the things about my journey that I found really important is that I want to share the joy and the virtues and the qualities that I've acquired in recovery without being incredibly too ham-handed about the methods that I use in order to get there. Man, you want to ask me about it, I'll talk to you about it all day long. but otherwise, I want to talk in relatively general terms in order to make sure that everyone has access to this experience, because it is a remarkable experience. And there's Handsome Lake. So returning with a new sense of purpose, the hero feels obligated to share their revelations with others for the benefit of all. No longer trapped by the ego, the hero has the capacity to support the transformation of the community, perchance the entire world. Now, I know there's one person on this training who knows something about Handsome Lake. Have you all heard of Handsome Lake, the Handsome Lake movement? Okay, so Handsome Lake was a leader in the Seneca Nation, I believe. Was he in Oneida? At any rate, you're gonna correct me when I'm done. That was afflicted with alcoholism. He'd apparently fought in the wars on the losing side of the French and Indian Wars, and had become acquainted with and addicted to alcohol use. He got to the point where he was so physically ill that he was near death, and spent 4 days in a near coma, and he was visited by 4 apparitions who basically read him the Code of Handsome Lake, which was a new way of looking at things, a new morality, teaching the people that to stay away from the mind changer, which was the alcohol, because it was a tool that was being used to control them, and that they needed to go back to the original ways of the creator and to honor him more frequently and to live a good life, and that abstinence was the way to live. And so he helped to spread this word among the entire 5 nations. He started the Handsome Lake movement, which at its height had something like 50,000 members who were involved in deep spiritual practice and abstinence from alcohol. And it was really one of the first major abstinence movements, recovery movements known, right? And he became a great hero and sage to a huge number of people within his purview, within his culture. And he was a culture warrior who tried to return their culture to traditional ways and to stay away from this substance which was decimating the population. So Handsome Lake, in a lot of ways, went through the entire hero's journey. He heard the call, he refused the call, he was put into a situation, an extraordinary situation, where the mentors appeared to him, gave him the marching orders, and when he was returned, he was told a number of things that he needed to do in order to get better, in terms of sharing the stuff and of taking in certain substances into his body. Strawberry juice was apparently very big in terms of a restorative for him, and to share this information with everyone. And he was told that he needed to share this information with everyone. If not, they were going to come for him. And he was going to pay the price for not sharing it with everyone. But again, he went through the entire hero's quest and was of great service to thousands of people, based on the fact that his life had been changed by going through this ordeal. Right? So a very powerful story. There's all kinds of information about it. If you Google up either Handsome Lake or the Handsome Lake movement, they can tell you things about it that I cannot tell you. So, Stephanie, have I got that anywhere near right?
Yeah, pretty much. When you look up the stories, there's always different versions, because everything's always handed down early.
Mm-hmm.
So each person you listen to, the story is similar, but that's basically what it is. He became an alcoholic, and they came to him in a vision and, and told him this is what needs to be done and to bring it back. So those are things we still try to follow today.
It's perfect, and really it is so emblematic of the whole recovery journey. It really is. It really is, because there's so many people who my specific experience is relatable, and it's true for all of us. That there'll be someone who needs to hear exactly what we will say in exactly the way that we will say it. And we may be the only people who can deliver that to that person. I say to people all the time when I'm facilitating recovery coach training is that you may be the first person who has the opportunity to make someone feel like they've ever been listened to. You may be the first person. Like, that is an awesome and a wonderful responsibility to have. So take it seriously. And it's the same way with the recovery story, man. It's like your story may be relatable to someone in a way that no one else's story has ever been before or ever will be again. So be brave and share your story. Your experience is invaluable, whether you think so or not. So many of us deny or naysay or poo-poo our own experience because we've heard other stories that seem so much more acute. There's so much more action, whatever it happens to be. But in point of fact, there is someone who's going to relate to you better than they relate to anybody else on this planet. You just haven't met him yet. Or maybe you have. Who knows? So returning with this gift to share with the rest of humanity or the rest of your culture, is a big part of the hero's quest. Like, what can we do now that we've received this treasure on our own to make the lives of other people better by virtue of sharing this experience? So the classic hero is just a regular person like you or I. The difference between a hero and a normal person, and don't we really all have a supreme ordeal, right? Well, it's like, if I believe it's a supreme ordeal, it's a supreme ordeal. That's how it is, right? So the difference is really just the willingness of the hero to throw away the regular way he looks at the world, and no matter what happens, to say, I am going to stick to this thing and I'm going to get to the bottom of this no matter what happens, right? And that's a really big move to make, and it's a scary thing to do. And people who do it, they often get the benefit of having been through it because they learn something important about themselves having been through it, right? And so at the end of the day, what it really means is that all of us are heroes. If we have the willingness and the desire to take on the things that are troubling us, that are blocking us off from freedom, because I came into recovery to be free, not to be absent, and all the things that don't have to do with substance use that are still keeping me from being as free as I want to be, I'm looking to identify those things and excise them from my life, because I want ultimate freedom, So all of these things are super important to consider, and the whole idea of making sure that I am willing to deal with what the day throws at me any day, right? And willing to learn that the lessons that the universe has for me every day is very important, because it really helps to determine my perspective on how I go out into the world on a daily basis, right? So let's talk about what are some of the parallels you can identify between the hero's journey rubric and recovery?
Man, I mean, I felt like, the mentor aspect of it was just like the most glaringly obvious parallel between the two. I mean, the second I saw that in the outline, I was like, oh yeah, that's my sponsor. So yeah, there was definitely that. Also, I mean, returning with the elixir, like, for us 12-step people, the 12th step, carrying the message and trying to bring one more person to the gift that we found, the freedom that we found, like you mentioned. Those are two parallels that just really stood out to me right off the bat.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I think really now, like the whole business of recovery is, I'm sick and tired of trying to convince people that recovery is possible. I want them to think it's desirable. Because at the end of the day, I think most people understand that people do get clean all the time. The question is, do I want it? Like, do I want it? How badly do I want it? And what am I willing to do in order to get it? I think that's the argument I'm trying to make now. Is like, not only is recovery possible, but it's so cool, and you really need to try it out. I really do. You know, any other parallels that you saw between this rubric and your own recovery story or recovery in general? I know we talked about some of them in between, but just curious.
I can say for me, the return again, that idea that I came across very early on, and it's in the AA literature, re-engaging with the stream of life, being a part of, that my addiction is largely a disease of separation, and that part of my recovery is to not just re-engage with the recovery community, but re-engage with community as a whole, and live a complete life of just being a member of the world, of living in the ordinary world, and how extraordinary that is for someone who drink and use drugs like I did.
Yeah, and that's terrific, and it's like, I don't have to say my newfound worldview and perspective just for the people in the rooms, right? I can spread it out. That's okay too.
I'm gonna ride with what Rob was saying. That fear of the unknown, I didn't feel like an ordinary human being. I felt like a loser. I felt like I didn't even feel human at times. So I was scared to engage into society, and that was one of my concerns. The fear that I had of being free, And now that I have experienced what I have experienced, I kick myself in the butt sometimes, saying, "What took you so long?" So it's a great journey for me.
Better late than never. And does recovery have a mythology? Do we deserve one? When I think about some of these things, like I think of the Washingtonians and like the Handsome Lake movement and the early stories of like Bill and Bob and like all of this stuff, right? I mean, like, and then you look at some of the more modern stuff, like the Bill Whites and the Don Coyuses and the Phil Valentines of the world, and the Jackie Helioses from the Phoenix and all of these people. I mean, aren't we deserving of like folklore of our own? I mean, this whole idea, like there are like 25 million people in recovery in this country. You know what I mean? Like there has to be some good lore there. And then just think about your own life and your own journey. Who are your recovery heroes? Who stands out for you as being the people who like blazed the trail that let you know that you could go ahead and do this and it was going to be great, And to that end, I actually have a short video queued up from one of my recovery heroes who I absolutely adore. It was part of the CCAR recovery telling series. It's about a 4 or 5 minute video, and I think Travis has it queued up. So why don't we look at that? You have that all set, bud?
Yeah, give me 2 seconds here.
And this is Mindy Richardson, who's one of our lead emergency department recovery coaches.
All right. Make sure I don't have it muted. Everyone hear that okay?
My dad and I were both.
The heavy metal maroon door swings shut.
Moment of clarity. Going to the bar.
Expecting my mother always to be.
One bad decision caused my entire life to be sucked into a tornado. And I've seen shattered pieces all over of my life. Looking back, going into those cellar doors and hearing that screeching sound as it opens, and like the smell of mildew and the coldness, the chill that I endured walking down in that basement, I found a crate in the corner. And I grabbed that crate and I sat on that crate and I looked up into the ceiling and it was like, wow, like the wooden beams were up there and I'm just looking like, how did I ever get here? How did I get here? My life was shattered in so many pieces. I was using day in and day out. For many days, I was in that basement hiding from reality. You know, I was sitting on that milk crate one day and my heart was beating so fast, like I think you could have seen it through my shirt. And something said to me, you have to change or you're gonna die. That voice sounded like it was right next to me, you know, and I couldn't believe that I heard this voice and looking around and there was no one there. Later on that day, I was in that basement and I was with 2 other addicts. They have been using as long as I've been alive. And they told me, Mindy, you can make it out of this. I said, Mindy, you really need to call that program. They encouraged me to call the program. And I made that call to the program. So a few days later, you know, I was waiting for the van to come and pick me up. That van pulled up in front of the house. And for the last time, I was able to come out those cellar doors hearing that screeching sound. I mean, my knees were buckling as I was walking to that van, and I hopped in and my recovery started. It was a long ride to the program, a very long ride. And I went to sleep because I was so exhausted of life, you know, but I knew it was something better on the other side for me. So as I arrived, they woke me up and I seen this huge building in front of me and there's like double doors. And on top of those double doors was admissions in white print. And I walked through that door and my journey continued. And that's where it started for me. You know, so looking back at my life with all of those shattered pieces, they were gradually coming together. Yeah. They were gradually coming together. But the most important piece was me. The willingness that I had, that I wanted something better for my life. Like I wanted something better for my family. You know, so like, listen, the tornado has passed. And the sun of recovery was like just beaming on my face, right? And like now I know that I am a new being. I'm full of confidence, full of self-worth today. I have my integrity, you know, and like, listen, I'm the face and the voice of recovery.
All right, so like how fabulous is that? You know what I mean? And talking about, I mean, well, there was the whole hero thing, right? She went through all of that and she comes back and what does she do now? She's helping hundreds and hundreds of people, you know, by sharing her experience, by sharing her courage, right? By sharing the things that she's used in order to get to a better place in her own life and how she's using it in her community and with her family and all these other ways, right? I mean, it's the classic example, right? Of what the hero's quest is all about and what it looks like to come out the other side. So, I may or may not have had a couple more slides. I really don't remember. But if I do, here it is. The world needs heroes. The recovery community certainly needs heroes. There are things that each of us is doing right now which are nothing short of heroic. Think about your own life. Think about what you're doing. You know what I mean? Celebrate your heroism. Share your story with others so we can all get the benefit of all of your hard work. Try and be the tide that lifts all boats. Right? And that's essentially all I have. Any other questions or comments? Happy to entertain them. Yeah. I hope you got something out of this whole thing. Is there any other conversation we want to have around this idea? We're pulling it in right on time. Look at us. But anyway, I hope that some of these parallels between the classic hero's journey and the recovery story hit home with you, but that you can see some of the parallels and maybe use them with some of the people you work with in order to motivate them. this is being recorded. If you want a copy of the webinar, I'm sure we can get it to you. And those materials that I made up that go through this line by line are also available in the chat. So if you want to grab those, you can do that too and use them, you know, workshops or bottom of your parrot key cage, whatever works for you. Anyway, thank you all for your time. Thanks for being here, and have a great Wednesday.